Hey, it's Austin James. If you're like me, trying to live your best life while living with diabetes, you can relate to worrying if you're doing a good job managing your diabetes. I use the Freestyle Libre 3 Plus sensor to get real-time glucose readings and see the impact of every meal and activity to make better decisions. The Freestyle Libre 3 Plus sensor can help me live life with diabetes on my own terms, and it gives me more time for the things I love, like being a dad and a musician. Now this is progress. Learn more at freestylelibre.us.
For prescription only. Safety info found at freestylelibre.us.
Whether you're ordering wings for the game, whipping up a 7-layer dip, or ordering pizza, there's something about football that makes you want to eat. And this football season, Uber Eats has the best deals on game day food. No matter what you're craving, from 2-for-1 pizza to buy one, get one wings, Uber Eats will be dropping new deals each week, all season long. Uber Eats, official on-demand delivery partner of the NFL. Order now. Terms and conditions apply. See app for details.
Hey there, Duke fans, and welcome to episode number 654 of the DBR, the Duke Basketball Roundup. It is, or I don't even know what day it is, but we're recording this right after episode 653. But we're here to preview two games this weekend, one on Friday, one on Saturday. We're going to start with basketball. Obviously, we have the game against Lincoln, PA on Saturday afternoon. We have the Duke football game, the big Duke football game against Florida State on Friday night. We will discuss that after the break. But before we get to the previews, I am Donald Wine. I'm your host for this episode. I have Jason Evans with me. Jason, which one are you excited for this weekend the most? Are you excited to see us play Lincoln? Are you excited for us to hopefully beat FSU for the first time ever?
Wow, that is a tough one. By the way, I was just going to say, you don't know what day it is. I didn't know what names we were on the last podcast.
Time is a flat circle. So
yeah, exactly. I think I'm more excited for the Florida State football game because in the grand scheme of things, an exhibition, as much as I want to see this basketball team play, an exhibition against a Division II opponent, not that it isn't important in terms of understanding rotations and all that other kind of stuff and who's going to excel and blah, blah, blah. We're going to talk all about it. But I think an actual real football game against a team that is, at least in name, a football power and a game that could not potentially, but would, if you win it, make you bowl eligible and really, sort of announce your presence as a very legit team on the national scene. I think that's more important than an exhibition against a D2 team. You think I'm wrong?
My answer was going to be yes. So I really liked. I think the Florida State game is more important.
I mean, yes, I'm wrong, or
no? Yes, as in both.
You're excited for both.
Yeah, I'm excited for both.
Yeah. Well, hey, that's a cop. Wait, hold on. You put me on the spot. You make me give an answer.
No, so I was going to say the football game is more important to me because it's could get us for a 6th win. Again, that history that we have against Florida State. But I will say this, I am super excited about learning the answers to some of these questions maybe with this Duke basketball team when we take the floor on Saturday. Yes, not all of them are going to be answered, but we might start to at least get enough for you and I to react very quickly when we have our live show right after the game on Saturday.
We have a live show coming up? Really?
We have a live show on Saturday. So before we get into the preview of Lincoln, let's remind everybody at 4 p.m. Eastern time, about an hour after the game against Lincoln is done, we are going to jump on here with all of you for a live show. Again, to register, or at least to get the link, tinyurl.com/DBR Zoom. That is Duke Basketball Roundup Zoom. Click that, get to our link, Saturday at 4 p.m. You will see our shining faces. Bring your headlines, bring your questions, wear your Duke gear. Be excited to see us and also interact with hopefully a lot of you out there that listen to the show. If you're not able to make it to the show, of course, you can still send us your headlines, dbrpodcast@gmail.com, and we will read some of them on that show. So, Jason, let's first get to the game against Lincoln, PA. Lincoln University Lions. They're an HBCU out of Oxford, Pennsylvania. They were 17-14 last year, 10-7 in the CIAA. That is in Division II. And Jason, I think we start with this. Before we get to the team and the stats and stuff like that, there are a couple of things that we need to note that have some Duke ties to Lincoln University. The first one is the head coach is Julius Hodge. Welcome back to Cameron Julius Hodge. Everyone remembers him from when he was at NC State in the 2000s. He was named head coach of Lincoln on July 24th, and it's his first head coaching stint after jobs at Buffalo, Santa Clara, San Jose State, and Little Rock. Jason, before I get to you on the coaches, on that coach, there's another coach that has a tie to Duke University, at least to Cameron, and that is assistant coach Mark Anthony Pounds. Now you're thinking, who is he? He was an assistant coach at Barton College in 2007 to 2009. If you remember, the exhibition game that we played in 2007 was against Barton College, and he came to Cameron for an exhibition game. He also played prep basketball at Northern High School and Riverside High School, both of which are in Durham. So he has a couple of ties to Durham and to Cameron. So Jason, first off, before we get to that, your comment on Julius Hodge returning to Cameron for the first time since he was a player.
I mean, look, I don't want to say that anyone who played for a rival is beloved. I don't want to say that, some guy who torched us repeatedly like Julius Hodge did is you're like, oh, great. It's awesome that he's back. But kind of, there's some nostalgia there for sure, especially for someone like you. You were in school at the same time as Julius Hodge. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But he is an NC State great. I want to say, I know he was first team all ACC. Was he ACC player of the year one year? Something
I don't know
that.
if he was player of the year, because that was the years like, Chris Paul and stuff like that. He graduated. It was the same year as Chris Paul.
Yeah, Chris Paul, JJ. I mean, look,
right.
He was in school at the same time as Jay Will was, I think. Yeah, there's some really good ACC players, but Julius Hodge is certainly a recognizable name and an important name in NC State basketball history and in ACC basketball history. So yeah, it's great to have him back. He's got a very experienced team with him. He brings back 14 out of 15 players from last year. 14 out of the 15 guys in their roster are coming back, which is just rare in this day and age of so much movement. I know Division II movement isn't the same as we're getting a Division I, but it's still that's tremendously impressive, especially for a new coach. Usually when a new guy comes in, everybody flees,
Mm-hmm.
Look at what happened in Kentucky and Arkansas. Yeah. Guys move around when coaches come in, but Julius Hodge came in and kept that roster intact. It's worth noting they've got 9 seniors on the roster this year. Their entire starting lineup will be guys who are seniors. I can't, I'm not sure
the top 7 guys. The top 7 guys returning from last year, as far as minutes are concerned and production, are all seniors.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's going to be, we've talked extensively about the fact that even though Duke is getting older, getting more physical, all that other kind of stuff, it's still relatively a young team. And we will immediately be tested by a team full of 22 and 23-year-olds. Usually when you play these exhibitions, when you play these D2 teams, size is a huge issue for them. I can recall, Donald, many a year where you were like, okay, they don't have anyone over 6'6". Mm-hmm. That is not the case with Lincoln. That's by the way, when I look at these exhibitions, that's the first thing I look at. I'm like, do they have anybody who can even hope to stay with our big men? And Lincoln actually really does. They've got their 2 leading rebounders from a year ago are both back. 6'8" senior Janae Coach Sinusis. I'm probably announced that wrong. JCS, I'm just going to call him. And a 6'9" senior Peter Sorber are both back. Sorber, by the way, averaged about 1.5 blocks per game, so he can rim protect. And he came off the bench mostly last year, but he played so well in their conference tournament, the CIAA conference. He played so well that he won the MVP of the conference tournament when they won that a year ago. So, and that was, by the way, like the highlight of their whole season. They were like around 500 a year ago. I think they finished 17 and 14.
17 and 14.
Season. Yeah. And that was after winning the conference tournament. So they were, hovering around 500 all season long, but winning their conference tournament was a really big deal for them. But again, the first thing I looked at, they got a 6'8" guy, they got a 6'9" guy. Look, they got no one who's going to be 7'2". No one's going to be able to play with Kamen Malawach, but they will at least be able to present a little bit of realistic size to Duke.
And a little bit of speed too, with some shorter guards, right? 2 of their guards that factor in pretty quickly or pretty heavily. Freddie Young, who's a 6'3" senior, and Reggie Hudson, who's 6'1". So you have those guys. You even have Manny Toa off the bench at 6'2". So you have some smaller guards that are going to, again, give us a look at what we could see throughout the season. We're not going to see a team bigger than us this season in Division One. So it's good to kind of see some of these teams that have a little bit of size, but also have a little bit of smaller guys so that we know how to contain quickness. But again, a lot of these guys can still. I mean, they spread out the floor. They're able to get points from any direction, and it's not like one guy is averaging like 20 points a game. Bakir Cleveland, 6'5" senior, he's the guy who averaged the most points last year on the team, 13.1 points per game, which is pretty decent. But again, can go off for 20, but also can spread it around to make sure that other guys are getting a part of the action. The main distributor is going to be Reggie Hudson, who averaged 5.4 assists per game. That's a lot of assists. So despite the fact he was getting 11 points per game, he's able to move the ball around the floor.
Yeah, I wanted to comment about each one of those things very quickly. Yes, you mentioned Reggie Hudson, 5.5 almost assists per game. He was all CIAA as a point guard. He was considered the best player on the team a year ago. Even though he wasn't like a huge scorer, he was primarily a facilitator, a guy who assisted. And he's not, by the way, I noticed his shooting, he's not a very good outside shooter. They do have a couple guys, couple wings, Freddie Young Jr., Aiden Anderson, both hit around 40% from three. So those guys are pretty good outside shooters. But the other thing, and you mentioned this, Bakir Cleveland being their leading scorer at 13.1 points per game. They had 5 different guys average better than 9 points per game a year ago. 2 others who averaged better than 7. So they basically got like 7 guys who average between 7 and 13 points per game. That says to me this is a team that absolutely is not relying on one guy to get anything done. And if one guy is stymied, like it's not like you go, oh, let's put Sion James on that guy and really shut him down. Oh, let's put Cooper Flagg on this guy and he won't do anything. This is a team in Lincoln that probably is perfectly fine. If you shut down one guy, they've got other guys who can potentially step up and play a larger role. Not that I think it will be a very competitive scrimmage. Lots of the time when Duke is playing these D2 opponents in these exhibitions, I said scrimmage, it's a game. It's an exhibition game. But lots of the time when Duke is playing them, we're playing like, the previous year's national champion at the D2 level or a top 5 team. And look, not like I have the projections for all of the D2 preseason rankings. I don't have those in front of me at the moment, but this is not a team that I believe is projected to be one of the best D2 teams out there. And my expectation would be that Duke should have a fairly easy time with Lincoln.
And I will say another thing that Lincoln does well, and what they did well all season, is they made you pay if you made a mistake with a basketball. They averaged 8 assists a game, a little over 8 assists, or I'm sorry, 8 steals per game, excuse me, and had 3.2 blocks per game. And you're thinking a team that only has guys that go up to 6'9" were able to protect the rim. They're able to do that because these are Hodge himself, a Harlem native. He got a lot of guys from New York and New Jersey who are tough, just right in your face kind of defenders. And that's going to pose a test. You mentioned in Countdown to Craziness that Sion James kind of posed the kind of in your face kind of defensive strategy to both Tyrese Proctor and Caleb Foster. They're going to see a lot of that on Saturday. Guys that are going to be in your face, hard nosed, grinded out type of guys who say, hey, even though I might be smaller than you, I'm going to make up for it with heart and grit. And so we have to maximize our intensity when it comes to this team. Yeah, sure, it's a Division II team that we should beat handily, but it should be a team that we do that because we match their intensity. And after that, the skills and the talent take over. Jason, I will ask you this because I know it's a little bit different than what we'll normally do with our previews. I want to ask you this about Duke. What are you looking forward to seeing from Duke as we approach this game? And again, in this game, there's a lot of questions that we still have, but what are some of that are on your mind that you're hoping maybe we get a little bit of clarity on this weekend?
Look, the most obvious thing to talk about is the rotation. I'm looking to see who comes off the bench, how quickly they come off the bench. Do they come off, in a certain order, that kind of thing? Because I'm interested in knowing more about John Shire's rotations. I've made some very bold projections about what I think Shire is going to do with his rotations. And by the way, it's worth noting, I would love to be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I would adore it if Duke was going 9, 10, maybe even 11 deep. When Patrick Ngongba is healthy, I would love it if that was happening regularly. I don't think it is going to happen that way. And so I'll be really paying attention to that. The other thing for me, I think, is I'm looking forward to see how these guys do offensively when playing against guys who don't know their every move. We've stressed this a number of times about the blue-white game, about Countdown to Craziness. is that they were playing against each other. They're playing against people who have seen what they can do every single day in practice for the past like 4 months. And they're playing, offensive sets that the defense knows it as well as the offense knows it. Literally, the moment you call something out, the moment you try and do something, there's no trickery in terms of what you're trying to accomplish. So I'm going to be very interested in seeing, we've heard so much about Con Knuppel. How is he able to score? Is he able to create on his own? Is Duke able to find ways to get him wide open and take a lot of threes? Is Duke able to integrate Kamen Malawach into the offense at all, or is he nothing but an offensive rebounder, and lob threat? And perhaps most significantly, Cooper Flagg. We have heard nothing for the past year, but that Cooper Flagg is a generational talent. You and I spent, probably an hour on a podcast over the summer talking about the fact that this guy was successfully D'ing up LeBron James and then bringing the ball down against Drew Holiday and getting good offensive looks and good offensive sets against arguably the best perimeter defender in the NBA. And we were like, oh my God, what's he going to do to college guys? And I don't want to say that he, was bad or anything like that, but he didn't necessarily stand out as generational when we saw the blue-white scrimmage. And when I saw practice, he didn't stand out as generational. If this guy is truly generational, he's the best high school prospect since Anthony Davis, which is what a lot of people say. I want to start to see it. We started to see it with Zion Williamson right away. He's going to be as good as or better, which people say could be, than Zion Williamson. Show it to me, baby. I'm eager to see it.
So you took one of mine in the rotations.
Only
bit.
one? Oh, only
well,
one?
The rotations bit has like several questions within it, right? It's like, bullet point 1, and then it's like subsection A through Q with the number of questions that we have about the rotation. So I'll give you a couple more within that, and then I'll offer another thing I'm looking for as well. You mentioned Cooper Flagg. Have you noticed, Jason, that, up until about 2 weeks ago on the official roster on GoDuke.com, he was listed as a forward. They have now added guard forward to his name.
Oh, we've talked about this.
And we've talked about it, and I want to see if that's the case, right? If I want to see if Cooper Flagg plays mostly as a guard, more in the wing, or if he's going to be a guy who's going to kind of shift between being a guard and being a forward. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. Obviously, we're not going to get all the answers there, but again, maybe provide some clarity there. Sion James, Mason Gillis, and Malik Brown. Playing time, positions, like what rotations involve those guys? You mentioned in the practice that Sion James has been the first one kind of to switch over to the starters very, very quickly. Is it one of those things where we see him quickly into the game, or do we see a prolonged starting, at least under the first TV timeout for the starters? Caleb Foster and Tyrese Proctor, we've talked about them on the show. Can they command the backcourt? Are we seeing some improvement? Can they be the two that kind of complement each other as we, as the whole kind of offense and defense moves forward? And then the one thing I'm looking for in an exhibition game, we always say an exhibition game should be one where we see a lot of things. We maybe get some clarity as to some questions that we may have, and we want to see them dominate. The one thing that Caleb Foster, Tyrese Proctor, Cooper Flagg, Sion James, a lot of these guys have been saying throughout the whole fall practice is they want to get back to the Duke of old, where at the under 8, under 4 TV timeout in the second half, everyone who is associated with the other team is going home because it's been over. I want to see if they come out and establish an intensity that says, hey, we're not trying to win here and get out of here. We're trying to win by 40. We're trying to win, blow the doors off, and we're trying to establish the fact that when you line up against DUKE, you are going HOME quickly. And so I hope that we kind of see that transpire. And it's no disrespect to Lincoln in that regard, but I want to see that intensity start here, because the intensity that you're going to need in March is rooted in October. So I'm hoping to see a little bit of that this weekend.
Dude, I LOVE that. That's awesome.
we may not be able to know all our names, but we can spell here on the DBR podcast. We have to say DBR. We have to spell correctly on this show. Jason, anything else before we wrap up the Lincoln portion of this show?
No. That's all I got.
All right. We'll take a break here. On the other side, we will shift to the gridiron. Florida State comes to town on Friday night. Big time matchup. Sold out Wally Wade Stadium. Can Duke get it done? We'll talk about it after this.
If you're a facilities manager at a warehouse and your HVAC system goes down, it can turn up the heat, literally. But don't sweat it, Grainger has you covered. Grainger offers over 1 million industrial-grade products for all your operations, including warehouse HVAC maintenance. And even better, they offer access to experts and fast delivery, so you and your warehouse can both keep your cool. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
We are back, and we shift our attention to the football field on Friday night. Duke, Florida State, a big-time Friday night matchup on national TV in front of the entire nation. And Jason, I feel like, and it's a different set of circumstances, but this game reminds me so much of the anticipation that we had before the first game of last season against Clemson, where a big-time Clemson team was coming to town, a team that we had not beaten in a very, very long time, and we wanted to get that win badly. But in this case, it's a little bit different because Florida State, we have never beaten since they joined the ACC in football. But this Florida State team is a lot different than the team that we were expecting to face when the season started. That team started out number 10 in the country, and FSU has gone 1-5 this season, 1-4 in the ACC. Their lone win, squeaking out a win at home against Cal a few weeks ago. But they had the same bye week as Duke did, so they will be as rested. They didn't have to, worry about another team before they faced us. But I'm really curious to see how this game goes, because this is a very winnable game for Duke. That is not something we could have said at the beginning of the season. It's kind of the game where we're like, well, as long as we keep it within 20, we'll call that a win and get up out of here. But this is a team that is absolutely reeling in Florida State. They have not been great at all this year. We'll talk about some of the players, Jason, but start with that. The fact that this FSU team is coming to town and it feels like a winnable game. Can it be a winnable game?
Yeah, I mean, this is Duke is a 3.5-point favorite in this game. And granted, that's, generally you get 3.5 points for playing at home. So maybe you go, okay, that's why Duke is a favorite. But if you just tried to bet this game before the season started, Florida State would have been a 20-point favorite at least.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if not more. So it tells you something, about the fact that Duke maybe has overperformed preseason expectations at least a bit, but Florida State is just woefully worse than anyone had expected them to be this year for Duke to be a favorite in this contest. And I think perhaps the biggest question in this game has got to be, has Florida State, quit on the season? They're 1-5. I mean, yeah, I guess there's a scenario where they really right the ship and they play really well and they find their way to 6 games and they get to play in a middling bowl game. But this is a team that came into the season expecting that they'd be very much in the hunt, if not a favorite to be in the playoff, the 12-team playoff. They're not going to sniff that. They're not going to sniff a significant bowl game. So have they given up on the year? I think is one of the biggest, because by the way, this is a Florida State team that has given up at times in the past. But last year for their bowl game, they were humiliated, embarrassed by UGA. It was not even mildly competitive. Half their players, something like that, chose not to play in the bowl game at all. They went, oh, we're just going to turn pro, whatever, So, and this season, several of their games, they've had a couple close games. They won one game, they beat Cal, but for the most part, they've been blown out of games, like non-competitive, not necessarily against great teams. Like Boston College beat them soundly. Mm-hmm. Not that BC's terrible or anything like that, but they got beaten pretty badly by Clemson. They are a team that seems like they are prone to perhaps giving up. And it'll be on Duke to maybe make them give up. That would be really, really great.
I think a lot of it has stemmed from the fact that their skill players, some of the heralded players, just have not been playing well this year. If you look at the quarterback, DJ Jalele, like he came in as one of the highest rated transfers of anyone in college football. They were super excited about having him as their new quarterback. after last year. And again, as you mentioned, making it to the precipice of the playoff, probably should have been in the playoff, got screwed out of the playoff, and since then they've gone 1-6, and not have not played well in any of those games, including the win against Cal. But DJ Ujalele is the one guy who's kind of been the scapegoat for this. But a lot of these guys, Lawrence Tolafili only has 230 yards this season rushing. He's their main rusher.
Yeah.
They have a lot of guys who are like kind of get around 100 yards, not in a game, like all season. But when you add it up, DJ usually only has 1,065 yards passing this year. There are some guys who get that in 2 games and with a quarter to spare. And so the fact that they just have not been moving the football has been really one of their Achilles heel. And on defense, they have, I mean, Florida State is not just known for their offense. Florida State is traditionally known for having a very solid defense. This year, only 2 interceptions, only 1 fumble recovery. They have 17 sacks, so they are able to penetrate the line and get stuff, but they have not been able to make the big plays. Now, the one bright light that they have is their kicker. The kicker hasn't missed this year a field goal or point after, and he's hit a few from beyond 50. So again, if they get beyond, get into Duke territory, at least he's a threat. But everything else, it just feels like they're waiting for the big play to go against them. And they're waiting for the mistake to happen for the other team to capitalize. And the other teams that they have faced, to their credit, have capitalized against them. Duke has to continue that trend on Friday. They have to continue to seek out the big plays. The tackles for loss that we have been, close to leading the country in all year, continue to do that. Continue to get the sacks. And again, a couple of big plays in the form of interceptions and fumble recoveries. That's going to be your key, because once they get into a funk, they have proven they are not able to get out of that funk in that particular game. And it shows in how these teams drop off. Again, that BC game you mentioned is one. The Clemson or the Memphis game is another one. The really big one was SMU. Like SMU, they took an early lead, and then SMU beat the doors off them.
Crushed them
42-16. So they're a team that, once, like you said, maybe they're not quitting on the season, but at least they get to a point where they at least quit on that game. It feels like in the form of their play. We need to frustrate them that way. And I know Manny Diaz does not like Florida State. I know he coached there for a little bit as an assistant, but damn that, he's a Miami grad. He's a Miami man. He's a guy that wants to come in here and beat Florida State and get bowl eligible and show that, hey, this team is markedly improved from last year when we were actually pretty decent, right? The entire year.
Oh, yeah.
We were one of the teams that were in the top 25 up until the last couple of weeks of the season. Manny Diaz, if he beats Florida State and beats the doors off them, they may not get into the top 25, but people are going to start saying, oh, this Duke team is way better than we thought they were going to be at the beginning of the season, and maybe we should give them some respect.
Look, you talked earlier about DJ Ugalele, whatever the hell, how you pronounce his last name. I'm not sure. DJ Ugalele, because his season
has been ugly lately, for sure.
He's been really ugly. He got hurt a few weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, and they said he'd be out for 2 to 3 weeks. Florida State has released their depth chart for the Duke game, and he is not on it. So the presumption is that he will not play, which means that Brock Glenn, who was the starter against Clemson, Brock Glenn is a redshirt freshman who came to Florida State, and he played against Clemson 2 weeks ago. He looked kind of okay in that game, and the presumption is that he will be the starter at quarterback against Duke. The Clemson defense is really, really good. So the fact that Brock Glenn wasn't an utter disaster against them, I guess, is a feather in his cap. He threw the ball 41 times, which is a big number. He got 228 yards in the air and threw a pair of touchdown passes, 1 interception. I mean, it's a decent night. The reason, by the way, he threw it 41 times is because, and this is, you sort of hinted at this a little bit, Florida State could do nothing on the ground against Clemson. They are supposed to be a good rushing team. In this game against Clemson, they rushed 23 times for 22 total yards. I'm going to repeat that. 23 rushes for 22 yards. That's not good, Donald. That's atrocious.
I can do that.
And, yeah, man. I mean, it was bad. You mentioned Lawrence Toafili, who is their best running back. He rushed for 16 yards in this game on 10 carries. That's just really, really, really bad numbers. And something else that you mentioned that I want to highlight. I think one of the big keys to this game is going to be, you mentioned that they have 17 sacks on the season. The best part of Florida State's team this year, other than the kicker, has been their defensive line and their ability to get to the quarterback. Those 17 sacks make them one of the top 20 sack teams in the country. And when you consider the fact that they've been trailing opponents much of the season, they've been down in most of these games, teams probably aren't in passing situations as much. So it's impressive that they've got 17 sacks when, like, SMU probably did nothing but run the ball the entire second half against them, because, they had such a big lead. So, and it's worth noting that Duke has in Malik Murphy a not very mobile quarterback. There are a lot of people talking about the fact that Malik Murphy refuses to run. He is not a guy who wants to get outside the pocket. So the Duke offensive line is going to have to keep that Florida State defensive line from getting to Malik Murphy, from causing havoc in our backfield. Because you want to fire a team up, let them get a sack, let them put you in 2nd and 17, 3rd and 19 kind of situations. Then teams get really fired up. Then they start really coming after you. And that's the place where it could be a problem for Duke. And then the last thing I want to say about this game is Bob Green, one of the great Duke fans out there, great Duke football fans out there. Bob Green posted something that is super important in this game. That's turnover margin. Duke on the season is +2 in turnover margin. Frankly, for a team that has a 5-1 record, you'd expect it to be even higher than that. But Florida State is -6. They average one more turnover per game than their opponent. Duke's got to win the turnover battle. If you somehow let Florida State, intercept a ball, or strip a running back or something like that, you let Florida State get a couple turnovers, that's a problem. And what you should be looking to do if you are Duke is get takeaways. This is a Florida State team that's willing to give the ball away. Let them do it. Take it away from them. Get yourself in a good field position. Don't do something foolish on a punt or, something like that. If Duke is able to keep Malik Murphy upright and win the turnover battle, they're coming out of Wally Wade with a W and bowl eligibility.
Yeah, I'm looking at the turnover battle. That's obviously a generic, a pretty big key, especially with this team, and how we've been able to, really, close out some games by getting turnovers and going the other way. I will say also on the offensive side, you mentioned it briefly, but 3rd down conversions has been our Achilles heel this year, or the lack of 3rd down conversions, and really, our offense has struggled to get to that 1st down marker and keep the drives going so they can get an opportunity for more points, whether they be field goals or touchdowns. But I'm looking to see if this team can convert some 3rd downs early and get some momentum on their side, get some early points. That again is going to throw Florida State into disarray. They've clearly shown that if they get behind, they're not sitting there trying to rile up the troops and get back into it. They've just kind of let the team who's beating them continue to beat them. But having said that, pour it on, right? If they get to a point where we're up, don't take your foot off the gas, because Florida State, the last thing you need is to give Florida State any ammunition to try and come back and steal a victory and turn around their season. They can point back and go, it was that Duke game that really galvanized us and helped us salvage our season. We don't want none of that. Let them try that next week. So this weekend on Friday, first of all, a very packed Wallace Wade Stadium. Everyone who's there, cheer loud for the two of us.
I love that it's a sellout. We need to be showing this team some love. We need to be showing the entire college football world that Duke can support football. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, night game, I believe it's a 7:00 game, 7:30. Check me on that. Check your local listings for that. But this is going to be a big, big deal. Yes, Florida State may be 1-5, but on Friday, they're 0-0. We're 0-0. Go for that first ever victory. 7:00 p.m. Eastern time.
On ESPN2. Yeah.
On ESPN2. So check in there. Make sure you're watching the game if you are not at Wallace Wade. And if you're at Wallace Wade, as I mentioned, give it to Florida State for me, especially, and for Jason as well. So for the two of us, that will end it on this episode of the DBR, the Duke Basketball Roundup. We will be back on Saturday after the Lincoln, PA game. Again, that is going to be a live show for all of you to tune into and also participate in. tinyurl.com/DBR Zoom. Click on that. That'll be your link on Saturday at 4 p.m. Don't check in at 1. We won't be there. Check in at 4 p.m. Eastern time, an hour after the game is done, and we will get cracking. Jason.
Yeah. By the way, if you check in early, I'm going to get a notification. It's going to say so-and-so's in your waiting room. I'm not going to admit you. I'm not letting people into the waiting room. I'm not going to do this. And don't fill my inbox with notifications from Zoom telling me that there are people sitting in my in-room. Don't go to that URL until 4 o'clock. Please. I don't want to get a ton of notifications. My inbox is already full enough.
Yes. Spare Jason's inbox. Do it on BCC.
Yeah, and by the way, to be clear, you don't have to register in advance or anything like that. We're not trying to screen people. We're hoping that no one will be a jerk. We'll kick them out if they do. We'll mute them very quickly if they do. But just 4 o'clock, tinyurl.com/DBRZOOM. DBRZ capitalized. DBR Zoom. Just hit that at 4 o'clock. I will let you in right away, and we will get rolling.
It will be in the show notes. It will be in tweets that we do at our Twitter at Duke Roundup. It will be on the DBR forums. There will be a lot of ways that you can figure out how to click this thing and get on the Zoom on Saturday. But we hope to see you all there. Wear your finest Duke paraphernalia, your Duke hats, your Duke shirts, your Duke jerseys, whatever you feel is your luckiest to be on TV, or at least to be on our Zoom TV. Ain't nobody going to really see it but Jason and I. But until then, we really hope to see you very, very soon. For Jason, I am Donald. It is now time for the Duke Band to play us out and take us home to Cameron on Saturday.